Bound by Fate, written by Whisper Quill. Previously in Chapter 10. A news anchor's voice cut through the room, flat and clinical. 2 male bodies were discovered this morning in an abandoned club basement. The deceased, identified as Will Jones, and Victor MacArthur, were reportedly linked to a known gang. Authorities have yet to confirm if foul play was involved. Rebecca stared at the screen, breath catching as the images flickered. Her skin went cold. Blinking up, she turned toward Damien, watching him as he read the news. "Don't you remember them?" she asked, unsure why she hoped for a reaction. "I do," he said, voice unreadable. Before she could respond further, Damien stood, turning his back to her. His shoulders were tight, fists clenching and releasing, like something inside him refused to stay buried. Days after the incident, Damien's wolf prowled the night. Fog clung to the ground as he scanned through the roads, when a distant scream shattered the quiet. His car halted to a stop. Another cry pierced the night, and he ran until he spotted a figure. At the park's edge, a woman stumbled and collapsed beneath the tree. Victor raised a bat, aiming to break her leg, but he never got the chance. Damien struck, sending him crashing into the trunk. Will lunged, but Damien's grip locked around his throat. The man thrashed in his unforgiving grip, eyes bulging, lungs clawing for air. A sharp crack echoed through the trees as the man's neck snapped, his body going limp in Damien's grasp. The second attacker tried to strike from behind, thinking he had the advantage. He didn't get far. Damien turned, swift and merciless. The fight was over before it began. Another crack. Another body crumpled to the ground. That night, Damien's wolf had left with a single goal: vengeance. But something shifted. Had he not stumbled upon another innocent victim of their cruelty, his human side might have hesitated, might have spared them. But mercy had no place in the face of such evil, so he delivered the fatal justice, and when it was done, he made it look like a suicide. Damien had invited Rebecca to dinner, and she said yes, claiming she needed fresh air, though they both knew it was more than that. To her surprise, the evening unfolded gently. Damien, usually guarded, had softened. His storm quieted. Hers too. She spoke more than she expected, and he listened, not out of obligation, but curiosity. That version of him, the one who asked, who stayed present, was the one she liked best. After their quiet stroll to the ice cream parlor, he stepped away to take the call. Left in the calm, Rebecca finally exhaled, realizing how tightly she'd been holding herself together. A smile tugged at her lips as memories of the evening flickered through her mind. She sat back in the booth, trying to quiet the tangle of thoughts. More than 15 minutes had passed. No Damien. No footsteps. Slipping out of the parlor, she scanned the sidewalk in both directions, thinking back to which way he'd headed. But the walkway was empty. Her brows knit in confusion. She dialed his number, but the call went unanswered. That silence stirred something deeper. Panic crept in when a shadow flickered across the alley. Low, fast. Her body moved before thought could catch up, drawn toward the dark. Raised voices echoed sharp and hostile, reaching her ears. Her feet silent but hurried. Then a thud. Metal clashed. A gunshot cracked the air. She ducked behind a rusted car, heart hammering. 3 figures stood in the alley, tense and restless. Their movements were off, too alert, too rehearsed. One of them moved away, sniffed in the air, and then, just as quickly, they scattered. Silence returned, thick and absolute. The alley ahead stretched into shadow, and her eyes landed on a body lying motionless in the dark. Her breath faltered as fear clawed her spine, slow and sharp. She took one tentative step forward, and then another. Just ahead, a figure in familiar clothes. A pool of blood was spreading beneath it. She stumbled forward, vision narrowing, caught between disbelief and dread. A sudden gust of wind cut through the alley, making Rebecca shiver as unease settled deep in her bones. She strained to listen, her heart climbing into her throat the moment a sharp clang echoed. Someone had crashed into a metal bin. Barely a breath passed before the chilling sound of a gun cocking sliced through the air. Then a shot. The crack of it shattered the silence, leaving behind a suffocating stillness. Rebecca froze, her breath caught as fear gripped her joints. At the far end of the alley, a few figures took off running, disappearing into the night before she could make sense of what was happening. The alley ahead stretched into shadow, empty now, except for what remained. Rebecca's eyes locked onto a figure lying motionless in the dark. She took one hesitant step forward, then another, blinking hard, trying to focus in the dark. Her eyes registered a figure. She recognized those clothes and the unmistakable pool of blood spreading beneath the body. A wave of cold panic surged through her. She stumbled forward, vision narrowing, her body caught in a frantic pull between disbelief and dread. A shiver ran down Rebecca's spine as Damien groaned in pain. She whispered his name before the word even registered. "Damien." Wounded, he twisted his uninjured leg beneath him and raised one arm, pressing the heel of his palm to the ground, trying to lift himself. Time seemed to slow. His bruised face turned to the side, and the realization hit her like a wave. He gasped for air, his features twisted in unbearable pain. When he blinked and opened his eyes again, they found hers. One hand clutched the wound in his stomach as blood seeped through his fingers. Her knees buckled at the sight of him, hurt and bleeding. A sharp ache tore through her chest as she saw Damien clenching his jaw. His vision cleared just enough to see her face, and his eyes widened in horror. Only one thought circled in Damien's mind. Rebecca can't be here. They'll kill her. Between ragged gasps, he forced the words out. You shouldn't be here. It's not safe." Her heart sank. Tears welled in her eyes as she shook her head and swallowed hard. Reaching out, she moved to support him. "Let me call for help," she whispered through sobs, but he cut her off, eyes snapping past her to something unseen. "No." The word came out as a growl. His gaze sharpened, nostrils flaring with anger. "Run." She blinked, stunned, unable to connect his pain with the urgency in his voice. Gulping air to steady herself, she wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, her body frozen between instinct and disbelief. She hooked Damien's free hand over her shoulder, forcing his weight onto her. With effort, he barely managed to steady himself against her side, just as another gunshot split the air. Before she could react, Damien shoved her down, shielding her with his body. The second bullet struck his back. He hovered above her, unmoving, a human shield. All color drained from Rebecca's face, but he didn't make a sound, not even a hiss. His eyes squeezed shut, fighting the pain, refusing to collapse onto her. When he opened them again, they were darker. This time, she was certain. His grip tightened around her arms. Twisting his neck, he scanned the alley, then met her gaze. There was something silent in his eyes, an unspoken urgency, and a warning. His gaze held hers, steady and fierce, and in that single nod, Rebecca understood. He wasn't just asking her to trust him. He was preparing to act. Then, with a swift roll, he shifted their bodies out of the open line of fire. They ducked behind a large trash can, swallowed by the dark. Their breaths were louder than the silence around them, sweat pooling on their foreheads. Rebecca looked at him, his face pale, jaw clenched. He could pass out any second. Still, one arm remained protectively curled around her. He turned toward her, eyes scanning for injury. When she shook her head, his breath hitched, then released in quiet relief. Her heart pounded so violently it felt like it might burst from her chest. Too shaken to voice the chaos in her mind, she pressed a trembling hand over her mouth, trying to muffle her ragged breaths. Then came the sound, sharp, indifferent, bones cracking. It echoed through the alley like a warning. Damien's expression shifted instantly, his body going rigid, jaw clenched. She leaned against the cold wall, the chill seeping into her bones. The only warmth left was Damien's body beside hers, tense, protective, and terrifyingly still. Rebecca raised her brows at Damien, questioning silently. He shook his head, a quiet plea for silence, then leaned out from behind the trash cans to scan the far end of the alley. The only thoughts pulsed through his mind. They've sniffed her out. She's in danger. I can't take any chances. He drew a deep breath. Stay here, he whispered. Don't come out unless I come and get you. Rebecca grabbed his arm, shaking her head. No. A deep, guttural growl rumbled from the far end of the alley, raw and unmistakably animal. Damien gripped her wrist tightly before gently prying her hand from his arm. Just trust me, he said, voice low but fierce. I won't let anything happen to you. Stay here. His jaw clenched as he forced the words out with conviction. That's when she saw it. A deep gash on his forehead, blood trickling down between his brows. And she blinked, stunned at the sight. She hadn't expected the night to spiral like this. Everything felt off. The city itself seemed to be working against them, but why? She'd never even been here before. First, she got assaulted. Now Damien got shot, bleeding, and yet somehow still clear-headed enough to form a plan to keep them safe. Her head was spinning, thoughts crashing into each other. But even through the haze, she felt Damien's arm press her deeper into the wall, shielding her from whatever was coming next. His back now faced her as he leaned forward, peeking around the trash can. His body tensed, ears alert. Then, before he could move, a black SUV tore into view from the far end of the alley. Tires screeched, the sound slicing through the night as the vehicle skidded to a violent stop. A man with a familiar face stepped out of the SUV, motioning urgently for Damien to take cover and get inside. Rebecca blinked, trying to place him. She'd seen that face before. She was sure of it. But where? Damien's tense expression eased slightly as another figure approached from the shadows. The familiar man broke into a sprint, veering toward the opposite side of the alley. His hand slipped inside his jacket, and in one swift motion, he drew a weapon, aiming it behind the person approaching the driver's side of the car. A painful howl rang through the night, sharp and jarring. For a moment, Rebecca wondered if the man had accidentally hurt an animal. Or maybe, The people in this neighborhood had grown so used to violence, they no longer noticed it. Then it clicked. The man who'd stepped out of the SUV. He wasn't just familiar. He was Damien's driver. Everything slowed, as if the chaos around her had been muted, leaving only the thud of her heartbeat and the sharp pull of Damien's hand as his body shielded hers completely. Before she could react, they were inside the car, and the driver threw it into reverse. 2 gunshots cracked through the air, one hitting the windshield, the other striking the door. Damien ducked them instinctively, his arm still wrapped around her. He reached for the door handle with the other, slammed it shut, and the car spun hard, tires screeching as they tore away from the alley. All the air in Rebecca's lungs vanished as Damien's body collapsed onto hers, heavy and trembling. His head tilted toward her, eyes barely open, trying to shift his weight. But he couldn't. She caught a glimpse of his face, and her breath hitched. His skin had turned a pale, bluish hue, beads of sweat clinging to his brow. He looked lost, drifting somewhere between pain and fading consciousness. With a slow, strained motion, he pushed himself upright, settling against the back seat. The adrenaline that had kept him going drained from his body, and within seconds, his eyelids fluttered shut. His head dropped against her shoulder. Rebecca didn't move. She couldn't. His weight slumped against her shoulder, heavy and limp. Damien had fainted. Her breath caught from the sick realization that whatever strength had kept him going was gone, drained from his body in an instant. Everything passed in a blur. From the frantic drive back to the hotel to the moment the driver gently laid Damien across the bed, it all felt distant, like watching someone else's memory. The driver hadn't hesitated. The second he saw Damien unconscious, he was already on the phone, voice low and urgent. Now, standing frozen in the room, Rebecca stared at Damien's face. Her feet refused to move. Her clothes were soaked in his blood, the fabric clinging to her skin like a reminder she couldn't shake. Fragments of the drive began to surface, the streetlights streaking past, the blur of motion outside. Damien's limp weight pressed against her side. The driver's hands gripping the wheel, knuckles pale, voice low as he spoke into the phone. It had all happened too fast. Now, in the stillness of the hotel room, everything felt suspended. The only sound was Damien's shallow breathing, each breath a fragile thread, pulling her back to the present. Seated in the back of the car, Damien's head rested in Rebecca's lap. One hand pressed against his forehead, the other clamped tightly over the bleeding wound. Her breathing was too loud in her ears, too uneven to control. She stared at his face, stunned, terrified that even the slightest movement might hurt him more. Minutes passed in a haze. Then Damien began to stir, groaning, thrashing weakly, his body twisting away from her touch. She fought to keep him still, whispering whatever words came to her, anything to calm him. Her voice trembled, barely audible, but she didn't stop. It felt like her life depended on it. Eventually, his body stilled. Tear streaks marked her cheeks, and her chest burned with each shallow breath. Her eyes never left his face, or the blood. Back in the room, it felt unreal, like she'd stepped out of time. A nightmare, maybe. But when she looked down at her hands, the stains were still there, and they told her everything had been real. In his half-conscious state, Damien mumbled incoherent words, and Rebecca leaned in, straining to catch something, anything. Then faintly she heard it. Her name. Her head jerked back, eyes blinking fast. The sound of it, his voice, saying her name, pulled an involuntary whisper from her lips. I'm right here. Had he sensed her near? She was thrown momentarily. The words broke her trance. She stepped back, only to realize she'd drifted closer to the bed without noticing. The soft glow from the bedside lamp cast shadows across Damien's face, highlighting the sharp lines. He looked too still, too pale, and a shiver ran down her spine. Thanks to her and the driver's quick thinking, the bleeding had slowed, just enough to keep him from slipping into shock. But the danger hadn't passed. Not yet. She tore her gaze from his face, needing to see herself, really see. His blood clung to her hands, soaked into her clothes. Her breath hitched, uneven, as fresh tears traced down her cheeks. One thought consumed her. Damien's going to die. I can't watch him die. The panic propelled her feet into motion, and she stormed out of the room. Eyes locked on the driver. Are you waiting for him to die or what? Her voice cut through the hallway, sharp and trembling. The driver turned, startled, his expression unreadable. You shouldn't have brought him here, she snapped. He should have been at a hospital. He answered flatly. That's not an option, miss. The calmness in his tone lit a flare of fury inside her. What do you mean it's not an option? Stepping closer, her voice rose, trembling with urgency. Don't you care if he lives or dies? I do, which is why it was necessary to... A firm knocking at the main entrance cut him off. The driver turned sharply and moved to the door, pulling it open without hesitation. Standing there was the same female doctor who had treated Rebecca days ago. Their eyes met briefly before the doctor rushed past her into Damien's room. The driver followed, but instead of stepping inside, he closed the door behind her with quiet finality. Rebecca exhaled, a flicker of relief surfacing at seeing the doctor here. But the unresolved confusion still clung to her, and her gaze shifted to the driver, searching his face for answers. Without thinking, she stepped forward, her feet carrying her to the door, until she stood directly across from him, close enough to feel the tension radiating off his still frame. He studied her posture, reading the question she hadn't voiced. She is here to treat him, he said, respectful but firm. Exhaling sharply, she blurted, Why didn't you take him straight to the hospital? She cannot possibly handle this on her own. He had been shot twice. Her face was etched in frustration and fear as she stopped herself mid-rant. His stance softened at her words. He bowed his head slightly, and with a gentler tone, he spoke again. I understand your concern, miss, but I couldn't risk it. He is shot, and if we'd taken him to a hospital, there would have been protocols and delays, police reports, questions we couldn't afford. He needs care now, not paperwork. He paused, then added with quiet conviction, and he's a public figure. If this gets out, it won't just be a medical emergency. It'll be a media storm. Cameras outside the ER, speculation about the incident, headlines twisting the truth. We needed discretion. Fast. The driver lied through his teeth. He couldn't tell her the truth. Not about Damien. Not about what he really was. Before Rebecca could respond, a sharp crash echoed from inside the room. Glass, maybe. Something had shattered, and both of their heads snapped toward the door. Then came the sound that froze her blood, a guttural howl, raw and agonized. It was Damien. The driver didn't hesitate. He lunged for the door, flung it open, and Damien's roar rippled through the room like a shockwave, rattling the walls and vibrating through the floorboards. Rebecca staggered back, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. He was alive. The sound confirmed it, and it did bring relief. But it also brought confusion, a flood of questions she couldn't contain. She knew the extent of the damage done to him tonight. She had seen it with her own eyes. Then how? How could a body broken, bleeding, barely holding on minutes ago, unleash something like that? No man in that state should have been capable of such a sound. Her heart thundered wildly in her chest as the echo of his howl sank deep into her bones. It wasn't only pain. It wasn't weakness. It was power, feral, unrestrained, and terrifying. Rebecca's thoughts scrambled for reason, for something to cling to, but nothing fit. Something was wrong. Something was changing. And whatever was happening inside that room, it wasn't just a man fighting for his life. It was something else. Something breaking free through the cracks of the world she thought she knew. And then, silence. Complete, suffocating silence, as if seconds ago there had been no sound at all. Her ears strained, desperate for something, anything. But there was nothing. Not a breath. Not a stir. It was as if no one was present inside that room. Hadn't he just been howling in pain? Was that even a howl? Her head spun, her ears still ringing with the phantom echo, and doubt seeped into her mind. She didn't know what to believe anymore. Was it real, or just the invention of her exhausted, unraveling mind? Rebecca waited outside, uncertain of what was unfolding behind the closed door. But she trusted the doctor. Trusted that she would do everything in her power to help Damien. Even though her mind spun with questions, her focus remained locked on that room. Eventually, she drifted into the washroom. Her blood-stained hands reached for the tap, trembling as she turned it on. The water ran cold over her skin as she scrubbed. Face, hands, arms, trying to erase the evidence, the memory. Tears slipped down her cheeks again, silent and unrelenting. The shock was beginning to wear off, replaced by a hollow ache. She stepped into the shower, letting the water wash over her, hoping it would ground her. It didn't. Changing into fresh clothes felt like the only thing she could control. When she emerged into the lounge, the weight of it all hit her at once. Her knees nearly buckled. Her body wanted to give in, to collapse under the weight of dread, sorrow, and the crushing sense of powerlessness. But she didn't. She stood there, breathing through the storm inside her, refusing to let it win. She had tried her best, and she wasn't done yet. An hour, maybe more, had passed. Rebecca was too drained to keep track of time. No one had come out of the room. A sinking sensation settled in her stomach as she finally stepped away from Damien's door and collapsed onto the lounge couch, positioned directly across from it. Her limbs felt heavy, and she must have drifted off for a few minutes, because the sharp clink of glass snapped her back to consciousness. The driver stood in front of her, placing a full glass of water on the table. She opened her mouth to ask about Damien, but he was already turning away, disappearing without a word. She sat there, quiet, exhausted. More time passed in silence. Throwing her head back against the cushion, she closed her eyes, but the image returned instantly. Damien's bloodied body was on the ground. The memory gripped her like a vice. Her eyes flew open, and she inhaled sharply. Then, a click. The door opened, and she was on her feet before she could think. Heart pounding, eyes locked on the room. The doctor stepped into view, the driver trailing behind her before quietly closing the door once more. Rebecca's eyes lingered on the sealed room for a few seconds, her mind still tethered to the person behind that door. Then the doctor spoke, drawing her attention. "Damien is out of danger now. He'll recover soon." A breath of relief escaped Rebecca's lips, and she nodded silently, letting the words settle. But as the tension eased, another emotion surged forward. Her gaze snapped to the driver. "You shut the door on my face." Before the accusation could land, the doctor stepped in, her tone calm but decisive. "He did everything on my instructions. You needed to stay out of the room." Rebecca's jaw clenched, but she didn't argue. The doctor continued, gentler now. "Damien's unconscious, but he'll wake soon. Then you can see him." The words didn't really soothe her, but she accepted them for now. The doctor stepped closer, her voice softening. "Are you hurt anywhere?" The sincerity in her tone made Rebecca look up, and once again, her beauty caught her off guard. Those tired green eyes met hers with quiet intensity, and Rebecca found herself answering honestly. "I'm all right. Just a few scrapes, doctor." The woman offered a warm smile, stepping closer. "You can call me Isabel." Rebecca nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. For everything." Her words were hoarse, worn thin from crying, and Isabel chose not to comment. Instead, she placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and spoke with calm assurance. "Try to get some rest. I will return in the morning. Once you've had time to settle, we can talk about tonight and everything you've been through." Rebecca didn't respond, but the gratitude in her eyes said enough. Isabel gave a final nod before turning away, leaving Rebecca alone with the quiet. Until Damien woke, no one was allowed inside, and the driver stood guard outside Damien's room. Whatever had happened tonight had shaken Rebecca to her core. Her stomach churned, a sick heaviness pressing against her ribs, too tangled and sharp to ignore. Finding Damien bleeding in that alley, his body limp, his blood pooling, had cracked something open inside her. Panic, anguish, a terror she hadn't felt since losing her parents. She couldn't survive another loss. Not now. Not ever. Somehow, he had become someone to her, someone who mattered. She didn't know when it happened or how, but the thought of losing him felt unbearable for some reason. Her mind couldn't process what that meant. Not yet. It was too loud for now. She sank into the couch as her limbs grew heavy. Nothing felt like hers anymore. Not her thoughts, not her skin, not even her body. The driver stood like a sentinel near the door, and she didn't want him to see her unravel. But the memories clawed their way back, and her composure began to slip. Tears welled up, slow and silent. Her final grip on control gave way, and she let them fall. Quietly. Alone. Downing another glass of water, Rebecca let the couch become her bed for the night. She didn't have the energy to move, let alone make it to her room. So she shut her eyes again, hoping for rest. but her mind refused to go quiet. Damien's groans echoed in her ears, fresh and raw. Every flash of blood behind her eyelids made her stomach twist. The memory played on repeat. His body broken, his voice strained, and yet somehow still protective of her. She had never seen anyone endure that kind of pain and remain sane. Hearing him scream had triggered something unexpected, and for a moment, it drowned out the horror of everything else she'd witnessed tonight. Behind closed eyes, panic crept in again. Flashes of the night her mother died surfaced, vivid and merciless. Each breath became sharp and uneven, scraping through her chest. But she didn't lose herself in it. Not yet. A few more hours must have passed when her eyes blinked open. The room was dim, unchanged, but her body felt restless and her mind wide awake. She dragged herself to the bedroom, with questions swirling in her head. She didn't know when she'd get the chance to ask Damien what had really happened. Who was after him? Did he truly have enemies capable of something so brutal? Who were those people? Just thinking about it stirred a tight, uneasy tension in her gut. Her intuition whispered that the answers wouldn't bring comfort. They'd bring consequences. She feared for her sanity, for her safety, but most of all, for Damien's life. Sleep was out of the question. Rebecca tried searching for her phone, hoping to reach Chris, Haley, or anyone. But then it hit her. Her bag. It must have fallen in the alley. Amid the chaos, she hadn't even thought to look for it. Removing the phone from his ear, Alex slammed his fist against the table. His nostrils flared with anger, and he tossed the phone aside just as the door to his office slid open. Blake stepped in, cautious at the sight of his Beta's mood. "Beta, everyone is waiting for you in the round hall," Blake said carefully. "Has Alpha Chris arrived?" Alec asked. His voice clipped. "Yes, Beta." Alec rose from his seat and followed Blake out, but the moment he entered the hall, his steps faltered. A sigh escaped him at the sight of Austin standing there. Blake shrank under Alec's glare. But before the Beta could lash out, Chris intervened. "I asked Austin to be present for this meeting." Alec's attention shifted. He respected Chris, not only for his title, but for the calm authority that seemed to command respect without force. For years, their packs had lived in Sunsville in balance, sharing responsibility and governance equally within the city. Nodding once, Alec chose not to argue. "Thank you for coming all this way, Alpha Chris. Your presence means much in these urgent times." Turning to Austin, his tone hardened. "You understand nothing leaves this room. Not our ex-Alpha. Not even your family can know about the attack on Damien." "I know," Austin said firmly. "I will uphold the secrecy. The last thing I want is word spreading to the pack, or worse, the council." Chris spoke from his seat. "Tell us what happened." Alex spared no detail, recounting the attack from start to finish. Only a select few had been summoned. Blake, the Silver Dawn Gamma, Midnight's Beta, a Silver Dawn commander, and a scout. This was by design. A closed circle to handle matters too dangerous for open discussion. With the growing number of border breaches and the recent attack on their Alpha, secrecy was survival. Austin added what little he knew of the infiltrator, now clinging to his last breaths under his team's care in the city hospital. He was under a powerful spell. Our healers tried, but every magical attempt to break through damaged his mind further. His body was already breaking down from poison, even though he was strong. We can't know for sure if he acted alone, or if others are still hiding, waiting for the right moment. The room fell into silence as the words sank in. Scout Harold and Warrior Mike had tracked the intruder's scent and caught him before he disappeared deeper into the city. But the unanswered questions hung heavier. Though Chris sat calmly now, the first news of the attack had shaken him. Rebecca was his family, his responsibility, and though she remained unaware of the supernatural world, the urgency to protect her grew sharper. He reassured himself silently. The right moment to reveal the truth would come. But for now, secrecy was law. These incidents could not go public, not without risking the reputation of both packs and drawing the council's scrutiny. Under Damien's last command, no one was to leave Sunsville, no matter what. Alpha Chris cleared his throat, drawing the room's attention. My sources in Ravencrest have confirmed a breach in the Legacy Hall of Records 2 days ago. Gasps broke the silence, and Austin muttered, "But wasn't it under the council's protection and jurisdiction?" Chris nodded grimly. Exactly. That's why they're keeping it quiet. They don't want anyone to know. Centuries ago, Ravencrest gave up land so the council could build the hall, but they were never granted any authority over it. Only the council controls what happens within those walls. The Legacy Hall of Records isn't just a massive structure of walls. It has become the home for all the elders residing there and the members working for the council. This breach means their home has been invaded. And not only that. Chris paused, tension rising with the silence before he continued. There have been reports of missing records from the Forbidden Section, the very part of the hall that housed ancient bloodlines, rituals, and truths too dangerous to be tampered with was kept hidden. His voice dropped lower, steady but sharp. Whoever did this didn't just breach walls. They've stolen fragments of our past, and perhaps our future. Those records could hold anything, from secrets of inheritance and succession, to forgotten rituals and prophecies, to knowledge of a bloodline's hidden strengths and fatal weaknesses. All members understood the gravity of the situation, as Chris further explained. I believe these incidents are connected. Damien's attack, the intruder in our city, and now the council breach, all happening in the same timeline. Alec absorbed each word and added, Alpha Damien knew he was being tailed. He paused, locking eyes with Austin in particular before finishing. He knew something would happen. That's why he gave the order that no one was to leave this city under any circumstances. Austin leaned forward, his voice taut. You mean to say that while my brother is fighting for his life, we are to sit here and wait for him to wake up before anyone is allowed to help keep him safe? Usually composed, Austin's anger was palpable. Alec answered evenly, though his words carried weight. Yes, that is the nature of an Alpha's command. He inhaled deeply, softening his tone. Austin, please understand, before this incident, he had 2 men as his personal security detail. They were with him in Riverton. For Austin's sake, Alec pressed on, ensuring clarity. You know your brother. He must have ordered those men to protect the company and our pack members present in the city, leaving himself to handle any threat directly. Whatever happened, it unfolded beyond anyone's control. Only Damien can fill in the gaps when he wakes. Until then, we must remain calm and not abandon our posts here. The school attack months ago, and the border accident already drew too much attention to this city. Lives were lost, ours and humans alike. But the fallout was contained. If word spreads about this attack in Riverton, Damien risks not only losing his soon-to-be council seat, but facing consequences far worse. You know the elders are not known for their fair judgment. The command in Alec's voice left little room for defiance. Austin's shoulders stiffened before he reluctantly nodded. "All right. I won't send anyone to Riverton, but promise me this. Don't keep anything from me. From now on, I want to know everything until my brother returns safely." The agreement held, and with Chris mediating, the room steadied once more. Plans were drawn for tighter border security and tracing any intruders who might still lurk within. Yet, beneath every word and every strategy, one question burned in their minds. Was there a mole inside the pack? Silence lingered even after their plans were set. Each man in the room knew what the others were thinking, but dared not say aloud. If there was a mole, it might not be in just one pack. Trust, once broken, would be the hardest thing to recover from. Still, the weight of Damien's absence pressed down on them all. Their alpha lay fighting for his life miles away, and without his voice, the pack was vulnerable. Every decision they made here would decide whether he had a home to return to, or a pack already broken from within. Yet one truth pressed heavier than all the rest. Rebecca could not remain in the dark forever. Too much had already unfolded in this city. Every secret the packs guarded, every illusion of normalcy she still clung to, was hanging by a thread. The longer she stayed unaware, the more dangerous it became. For her, for Damien, and for everyone tied to them. How much longer could she be shielded from what he is, from what bound them together? The real question wasn't if Damien would reveal their truth, but when, and when that moment came, how she would bear the weight of a world so far from the one she thought she knew. And beyond all of that, one threat loomed larger than any intruder or hidden mole. If the council discovered who she truly was before Damien could claim her, the cost would not just be hers to pay, but the entire pack's. The night hadn't ended for either of them. Damien stirred in bed, caught between waking and sleep. His body felt heavier than stone. His body bore the aftermath of the ambush, thin black lines from dark magic crawling like veins beneath his skin, bullet wounds sealed but not healed. The poison still lingered, slowing his heartbeat. Even unconscious, he looked like he was fighting something only he could see. Sweat beaded on his temple, and a faint tremor ran through his hand. A flicker of warmth brushed his hand, so real it pulled him out of the haze. He thought it was her, Rebecca, steadying him the way she had before everything went dark. Her voice echoed faintly in his mind, soft and distant, like a whisper. His eyes opened to an empty room. No Rebecca, no sound. Only the faint scent of blood in the air and the low hum of pain running through him. He looked down at his hand, fingers twitching, as if the memory of her touch hadn't faded yet. Another surge of pain tore through him. Sharp, cold, relentless. The magic was still inside him, refusing to fade, dragging him back under. The healer had done what they could, but dark magic wasn't easy to cleanse. It clung to the soul, twisting through the veins like smoke. Every so often, Damien's eyes would flicker open, briefly, unfocused, before he slipped back into the haze of pain and exhaustion. Rebecca hadn't slept. The room still smelled of blood, a stark reminder of how close they'd come to death. Every time the floor creaked or the wind brushed the terrace door, she flinched, half expecting another gunshot. But through it all, she stayed, terrified yet unwilling to close her eyes. The night was quiet now, but the silence didn't feel safe. It felt like a pause before something worse. The once proud territory of the Sinshade Wolves was unrecognizable now. Their banners torn down, their homes stripped of loyalty and purpose, and their land marked by the black crest of Felix's rogues. The lands no longer looked like home. Smoke still curled from the ruins where pack houses once stood, and the scent of blood clung to the dirt. Bodies had been cleared, but the silence they left behind screamed louder than the battle ever did. The conquered ground was already changing under Felix's orders. Farms now fed his soldiers. Water lines were rerouted to fill his barracks, and bridges were reinforced with guards, who demanded tolls from every transport, carrying goods toward nearby villages. Witches worked at the borders, tracing wards that shimmered faintly in the night air, sealing the land from prying eyes and unwanted attacks. The captured Sinshade fighters were quickly divided. Those who bent the knee were forced into training, while those who refused met their end where they stood. The message spread faster than fire: obey or vanish. The women of the pack were spared only to serve, their lives repurposed to sustain the new order. Some tended to the wounded, while others kept the farms running, watched by guards who ensured loyalty came before mercy. Children were herded into the old training halls, their lessons now rewritten to serve Felix's cause. The Alpha's bloodline was gone, their crest burned from every wall, their memory replaced by the sigil of the Master. What once was a proud pack now moved under orders, breathing but no longer living. The castle's main hall was dim, lit only by the flicker of torches along the stone walls. Felix sat at the head of the long table, one hand draped lazily over the arm of his chair, the other tapping a slow rhythm against the wood. His most trusted people had returned, their boots heavy with dirt, and their eyes set hard with determination. One after another, they stepped forward beneath the gaze of the figure seated at the far end. The Master. His presence alone silenced the room. A warrior bowed his head first. "The legacy hall has been breached, Master. The forbidden records you sought are now in our hands. Their keepers won't even realize what's missing until it's too late." He was Felix's right-hand man, and his name was Hans. Another voice followed quickly, rough with the pride of violence. "Silver Dawn has been struck. Their Alpha lived, but the wound we left on his ego will not be forgotten. The message has been delivered, loud and clear. They are not untouchable, Master." A sorceress lifted her chin, her dark eyes glowing faintly with sinister intent. "The wards we set over their borders are holding. Confusion spreads among them. They search for enemies that aren't there, while our spies map out every weakness they hide." Felix leaned forward, eyes glinting as he studied the people before him. "Do you see? This is what the Council failed to grasp when they cast you aside. Alone, you were nothing but scraps, but together under me, you are becoming something their packs will fear to speak of." A murmur of approval rippled through the room, but Felix silenced it with a lift of his hand. "Do not mistake me. Fear alone is not enough. Every move must feed the next." The hall fell into silence once more. His people waited, the air thick with the weight of his judgment. The master's low voice finally broke it. "You've done well," he said calmly. "Every attack weakens them. Every rumor spreads fear. Step by step, we'll close in until there's nowhere left for them to run." He rose from his seat, pacing slowly, his voice sharpening with each word. "We have already stolen what others thought untouchable. That breach wasn't just about theft. It was a message from me. Nothing they build is safe from me anymore." His gaze lingered on the gathered faces, and they all felt the warning threaded beneath his words. Do not mistake survival for victory. This is only the beginning. Inside the main hall, maps and ledgers covered the table. Stolen records lay before Felix, containing bloodlines, secrets, prophecies, and weaknesses, all inked in neat handwriting. With every strike, he was pushing his plan forward, one step nearer to the revenge he'd waited years for. Each right move brought him closer to the council and the ones who had taken everything from him. And even as his plans grew, the warden's magic dimmed. The old guardian's light was fading fast, and Felix knew time was slipping through his hands. He couldn't wait for power to return. He had to build it, piece by piece, before everything collapsed. A slight breeze caressed her cheek as sunlight slipped through the drapes and danced across her face. She stirred, shifting to escape the light, when a sharp jolt in her neck snapped her awake. Her eyes fluttered open, blinking against the brightness. She rubbed the sore spot, muscles stiff from the regretful nap she'd taken, curled in the chair. Her body bent at an unnatural angle, as if bracing against something even in sleep. She raised a hand to block the light, squinting toward the clock. It said 6:58 a.m. With a slow twist of her neck, she stretched her arms, trying to smooth out the ache that clung to her shoulders. Each movement felt like peeling herself out of something heavy. She rose, legs reluctant, and padded toward the bathroom. The silence in the room felt too still. Minutes later, she stepped out, quietly shutting her bedroom door behind her. The same driver, or more accurately, bodyguard, paced outside Damien's room. A frustrated sigh climbed her throat, and disappointment settled in her chest. She knew the drill. She wouldn't be allowed near Damien until his watchdog deemed it appropriate. Her thoughts spiraled, crowding her vision. She barely registered the man now staring directly at her. By the time she did, her body had already moved, drawn forward until she stood just outside his door. The bodyguard's sharp gaze jolted her into awareness. She must have looked unhinged, standing there, eyes blank, mouth slightly parted. Embarrassment prickled her skin, and she blinked before she cleared her throat. "Is he—" The words faltered. Her voice cracked under the weight of everything she couldn't say. She didn't know what she was asking. If he was awake, alive, still slipping away. Her mind was a tangle of dread and hope, and all she could do was wait for the man to speak. Steadying herself, she inhaled deeply and stepped forward, moving past the bodyguard. Her fingers hovered inches from the knob when a firm arm blocked her path. "What are you doing, miss?" he asked, voice polite but edged with caution. He gently pulled her hand away, careful not to grip too tightly. "He's not conscious yet," he added quickly, eyes flicking toward the door. "It would be best for both of us to wait until he wakes." The apology came fast, almost rehearsed. He knew the stakes. If Alpha Damien caught wind of any disrespect toward her, consequences wouldn't be verbal. Rebecca's gaze didn't waver. Her voice, though soft, carried a weight that made him flinch. I need to see him. Now. Please. He hesitated, jaw tightening. I understand, he said, shaking his head, but I still can't let you in. Not yet. I am under strict orders. She didn't argue, not with words, but the way her shoulders stiffened, the way her eyes lingered on the door, as if she could will it open, he felt it. Will he get better? I mean, when will he? Her voice trailed off, brittle with uncertainty. At this moment, the bodyguard's expression spoke louder, as exhaustion etched into his features, and a hesitation, or maybe guilt, in his eyes, made her stop pressing. She turned to leave, but his voice caught her mid-step. He will be all right, miss, he said, masking his tiredness. I'll let you know the moment he wakes. She nodded in gratitude and walked away, but the heaviness in her chest didn't lift. It settled deeper, coiling in her gut like something unspoken. Why am I the only one not allowed to see him? The thought flickered, sharp and unwelcome. She dismissed it quickly, but not before stealing one last glance at Damien's door. The silence behind it felt too complete. No proper medical care, no explanation, and yet he survived. She moved to the kitchen, the air colder than she remembered. Brewing a mug of coffee, she stared at the steam rising from the cup, her appetite absent. Food felt irrelevant. Her body was awake, but her mind was left stuck somewhere else. The rest of the day passed in a haze, and Rebecca's mind refused to stay quiet. Every thought seemed to circle back to the same closed door, to the same pale face half lost in fever and blood. The sky had turned a faint violet by the time she found herself standing by her window, watching nothing, feeling everything. When night finally came, sleep did not. But exhaustion won where willpower faltered. Her body surrendered before her mind did, curling into the sheets. The thick silence of the room pressed in, and somewhere beyond the walls, Damien lay unmoving. As her eyes drifted shut, the last thing she remembered was the sound of her own heartbeat. Rebecca's fingers pulsed with a low hum, like static trapped beneath her skin. When she opened her eyes, the world around her was impossibly green, grass so vivid it shimmered, dew catching light that had no source. She sat up slowly, her limbs unfamiliar, as if borrowed from someone else. Her head buzzed, not with pain, but with recognition. She had been here before, or dreamed of it. She blinked, unsure whether she was awake or dreaming, because the ground beneath her felt real. Damp. Alive. A twig snapped behind her. She turned sharply, breath caught. Someone stood far ahead, half veiled in light. A silhouette tall enough to look familiar. Her breath hitched. Damien? The name fell from her lips before she could stop it. No answer came, only the faint echo of her own voice. Then came a sound of footsteps circling her. Rebecca turned, heart pounding, but there was no one, only a low growl that vibrated through the air like thunder, and she froze. Then the light came, blinding, white, and alive. It surged toward her, and instinct made her shield her eyes. But it didn't stop. It passed through her. No, into her, tightening her chest until she thought her ribs might crack. Her body tilted, weightless and heavy all at once, and the ground rushed up to meet her. Darkness engulfed her fully. Then silk. Something brushed against her fingers, something soft, impossibly smooth. She couldn't see, but she felt it. Wet warmth nudging her shoulder, a breath against her collarbone. She tried to move, but her limbs were slow like she was underwater. A low whine echoed in the space around her, not human, but not threatening, and somehow familiar. Her heart leapt, and her breath caught as she looked down, only to find nothing there. But the warmth lingered, the air shifted, a faint whisper rippled through the dark, words she couldn't make out at first, until she realized it wasn't sound at all. It was a heartbeat, not hers, slower, rougher, straining. Her pulse synced to it. Images flickered, black-stained hands, veins glowing with something unnatural. The ground beneath her turned to ash, and then she saw him. Damien, kneeling, blood soaking his stomach, dark veins crawling up his arms and neck. She reached for him, but her hand went straight through. The moment it brushed where his shoulder should have been, the same veins lit beneath her skin. Rebecca gasped as pain surged through her instead, hot, raw, breath-stealing. Her vision went white. Then he looked up. Their eyes locked across the impossible space, and just before the dream shattered, his voice echoed inside her head. "Don't let it take me." Her body jolted upright, gasping. In the next room, Damien's body twitched, breath quickening before settling again. The room was dark again. Rebecca's sheets lay tangled around her legs, damp with sweat that had already begun to cool against her skin. Yet her pulse still thundered, too vivid, too sharp to be just a dream. For a fleeting moment, the warmth lingered on her hand, and her fingers tingled with that strange, electric hum. The night fell silent, as if something unseen had just linked them both. And then Damien's eyes snapped open. The chamber was dimly lit, the only sound the low crackle of fire and the faint scratch of quill on parchment. Rows of open tomes lay scattered across the desk, some old enough to crumble at a touch, others marked with foreign runes only Felix could begin to decipher. Since the raid on the Legacy Hall, he had spent countless nights unraveling the Council's hidden language, a tongue crafted by witches and sealed by old magic, meant to be forgotten. To others, it would have been impossible. To Felix, it was almost instinct. His bloodline carried gifts born of isolation and madness alike, the kind of genius that had built empires and burned them down in the same breath. When Hans entered his chambers, the air grew heavier. He stopped several steps away from the desk, bowing his head. "Master," he said quietly, "our men from the Riverton strike have returned." Felix didn't lift his gaze. "Losses? Minimal on our side," Hans replied. "But there is something unusual in their report." Felix's hand stilled. "Speak." "A human girl was present during the attack," Hans reported. "She didn't intervene, but my men caught her scent nearby. They said she was hiding in the alley, watching. One of them swore she looked straight at them, even with the wards active. What concerns me is she shouldn't have been able to see them, Master. Not even trained wolves could have pierced that spell so quickly." Felix looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. "A human girl?" "Yes, Master. That is what they claim." For a brief moment, the firelight flickered across the sharp lines of his face. Sunsville is home to all manner of creatures, he murmured. Humans live among witches, warlocks, wolves. They've grown used to sharing streets with monsters. But he took pause, pondering over his next words carefully. Familiarity does not grant privilege. He leaned forward slightly. No human should have reason or access to stand that close to an alpha of Silver Dawn, not without significance. Hans hesitated, then added, they heard her call the alpha's name. It sounded personal. Felix's eyes darkened with thought. So she knows him, he murmured. Interesting. That means she's not just another bystander caught in the wrong place. He rose from his chair, the hem of his coat brushing the stone floor. Connections make even the strongest bleed. If she matters to him, then she matters to us. He turned toward Hans. Find her. Quietly. I want to know who she is, where she came from, and why she could see through magic that should have blinded any human. Hans bowed his head. As you command, master. Felix's gaze lingered on the parchment beside him, ink still wet, half a word left unfinished. If fate insists on sending me curiosities, he said softly before finishing, then let's see what secret this one carries. Hans left in silence, the heavy doors closing behind him. For a moment, Felix stood unmoving, his gaze fixed on the parchment before him. A partial translation glared up at him, a single phrase carved from the stolen records. The union of mortal and beast shall awaken what was long buried, and the lost power shall rise again. The quill twitched in his fingers. Coincidence. He didn't believe in them. Felix leaned back, mind already spinning through possibilities. A faint smile crossed his face as the candlelight danced across the ink. Let's see what secrets you've been hiding, little anomaly, he murmured, setting the quill to parchment once more. They always reveal themselves to me, eventually.